Hi, everybody. My name is My name is Maria Korlov. I'm the editor at MetaStellar. We're an online science fiction and fantasy magazine, and we also write about writing. So today I'm going to be talking about Claude, which is an online app that can read and analyze an entire book at once. It's basically a ChatGPT clone from a company named Anthropic, but it can handle text of up to 75,000 words at one go. And ChatGPT is limited to a few hundred words at a pop. So dramatic difference. You can literally have it look at a whole book if your book is under 75,000 words. Otherwise, you might have to break it up into pieces. So I tried it out. I went to the website and I set it up. So here's its logo, and let me show you the website where it's at. Here we go. Okay, so this is the homepage of the website, Claude Instant 100K. And the website again is po.com/Claude-instant-100K. And I'll have all the links in the description box below. And I'll also have a link to the full article where I go through all this in a great deal of detail. You will have to sign up for Claude. It's normally free, but in order to get access to this 100K thing, you're going to have to pay $200 a year. But wait, you get 7 days free trial. And that's what I did. This morning, I signed up for the 7-day free trial. I did have to give my credit card information. Okay, so you sign up, you get into the system, and now you can start. And what I did, after a little bit of experimentation, I put in this prompt. You're an expert fiction editor with decades of experience. You've worked with hundreds of best-selling sci-fi and fantasy authors and understand what makes a book engaging. I'm a sci-fi author at the beginning of my writing career and need help with structure, style, grammar, and punctuation. If you understand, please say, I'm ready. Please paste your text. After I've pasted in my text, then say, got it. What's the first thing you'd like me to look at? So that was my prompt, and I pasted in my text. So for the first book I had to look at, it was Crim Times, the first book I published on Amazon, and it's about 17,000 words. Okay, so, and it gave me stuff. I pasted the whole thing, and it gave me a whole bunch of information about what it thought my book was about. All right, so once the book was in there, and it said some nice things about it, so thank you, Claude. So thank you, Claude, for that. I started looking at some of the things that I can do with it. So the first thing that I always like to do with these kind of tools is to try out the summarization feature, because large language models like ChatGPT and Claude are good at summarizing. And I, as a human, am bad at summarizing, and I'm bad at outlining. So I've got about a dozen books in this series of various lengths, and I've forgotten what happened in my previous books. And so I always have to keep going back and trying to figure out what happened because I didn't keep my outlines up to date. So can Claude fix it? And here's what I did. Here's the prompt that I used. Please create a detailed scene list for the book. For each scene, tell me the chapter number, a phrase describing the scene, the date and time of the scene, the location of the scene, the characters in the scene, and a short list of events that take place in a scene. Here's an example of how it should look. And I gave it a little example of what I want my little scene outline to look at. The more specific you are with the prompt, the better, because it can't like really read your mind and know what you're trying to go for. So if you give it a lot of this explanation, it already knows that I'm writing science fiction. It already knows it's supposed to be the editor. And so now I just have to tell it what exactly that I want. And it gives me some answers. It gave me a long list of chapter and scene outlines, and then it stopped after a few chapters. I had to type continue, and it kept going. After a while, it started losing track of what it was supposed to include in each section. So one thing that you might want to do is do it in sections, like give me an outline for all the scenes in chapter 1 or in chapter 2. Or you might want to say, give me 1-sentence summaries for all the scenes, and then go back and say, I want the locations for all the scenes, or I want the list of characters in each scene, and do it that way. I would have liked to experiment with this to find out what works best and what doesn't, but and this came as a big surprise to me. You only get to ask 100 questions, and not 100 questions a day, 100 questions for a whole month. So for $200 a year, I'd want to be able to ask more than 100 questions a month. Now, they do say that this is only the first implementation, and that limit might change. But right now, keep that in mind. There's only so much experimentation you're going to be able to do on the entry level thing that they've got going on right now during their experimental phase. As it gets better, we might get more. All right, so moving on. After the scene list, I decided that I wanted to do a character list. So again, I'm always losing track of how to spell people's names, what they look like, who they have a beef with, what they talk like, all that stuff. So again, I asked it for a list of everything in the book. So I said, give me a list of all the named characters in the book. It gave me a list of a few characters, but it didn't feel complete. So I said, did you miss anyone? And it found a couple more characters. And then I said, did you miss anyone else? So it took a couple of rounds of this before Claude finally said, after a third check, I believe I have now included all the named characters mentioned in the story. So that's a warning to you. If you're using this, you also want to have Claude go back and double check its own work. So you need to review its work too, because large language models are always making mistakes. But you can also have it review its own work. And when I reviewed its work, it was accurate. It got my characters right. It got my outline right. So then I had to create a character sheet for each character with their name, a list of the chapters where they appear, what they look like, how they first show up, their relationships with other characters, their goals and motivations, how they talk, all this key information. And it did that. But it would only do it for one character at a time. So I had to keep saying continue or say, now do this character. So again, it has problems doing multi-step instructions. It kind of loses track of where it is. Again, it's just the baby AI. All right, you can use the same approach to create a list of settings, a list of themes or motifs, character arcs, key turning points, and so on. For example, I asked, what are the key turning points in the book? And it said that the assassin shoots at Seymour but misses. This starts the investigation and sets the plot in motion. That is true. That does start the investigation and does set the plot in motion. Then in chapter 5, the detective finds the body of a paper deliverer. This suggests someone is trying to cover up clues and raises the stakes in solving the mystery. That is true. It got it right. That was a turning point in the book. So I was very, very impressed with this. And then I went on to the next stage, the structural edit. And I was even more impressed here. So let me tell you what a structural edit is. I think of editing as happening in 3 layers. First of all, there's the big picture, the structure of the book, the whole plot. Does it work? Are there plot holes in it? Are there subplots that don't even belong in there, that don't make sense? Do the characters' actions make sense? Is this thing hanging together, right? So are there ups, does there conflict, all those big picture stuff that goes into making a book. And if you want to fix one of those big picture things, you often have to do a lot of rewriting. If, for example, there's too many characters and you have to reduce characters, that's a lot of rewriting. If there's a subplot you want to take out or a subplot you want to add, that's a lot of rewriting. You don't want to do a grammar edit or proofread and then have to redo everything from scratch, because all that proofreading is now wasted because all the text has changed. So you start out with the big picture edits. Then I like to go to the style edits. This is the writing style, the pace of the book, the tone of the book, how funny it is, how descriptive it is, how much summary there is, how much showing and telling there is, and how much dialogue there is, that kind of thing. The actual writing of the book. You want the writing to be consistent, you want it to be well paced, you want it to have enough description but not too much, that kind of thing. So that for me is the style, the style stage of an edit. And sometimes people lump it in with a content edit along with a structural edit. Sometimes people do it separately. I like to do the two things separately. Often they will involve different people. A structural editor who's good at looking at the whole book and seeing what the problems are is different from a proofreader who's good at finding punctuation mistakes. All right, and that's the final stage of the edit, the copy edit or the proofread, or also known as the line edit. That's where somebody goes through and looks for the missing commas and the apostrophes and the misspelled words and the grammar mistakes and all those kind of fiddly, tiny little bitty mistakes. So let's start with the structural edit. And I have to say that Claude was very, very good at structural editing. I mean, scary good. I was very, very, very impressed. Here's the prompt that I used. Let me pull that up. I said, you are an experienced structural editor. Take a close look at the plot of the book. Are there any plot holes or loose threads? Are there any points where the developments don't make sense? And it found 4 areas that needed improving. First of all, the villains. I've been talking a lot today. Okay, so first of all, the villain's motives are not fully explained. His reasoning for sabotaging the company where he works are very vague. Then the detective seems to rely heavily on vague suspicions and circumstantial evidence. Then some characters don't seem to act in logical ways. And finally, there's too many coincidences or conveniences. But it also said these types of plot devices are common and not necessarily problematic. All right. So if I were to go back and revise this book, I might make the villain's motive a little better. So I asked Claude, what are its suggestions for improving the villain's motivations for being the griefer, the bad guy? And Claude suggested that maybe he might have a clearer personal stake in the outcome. He could be motivated by greed, looking to buy the company cheaply after destabilizing it. Or he may have a grudge against specific individuals. Personal motivations tend to make goals more compelling. Or Claude suggested that I tie the villain's motives to the broader themes of the story. For example, if the theme is virtual versus reality, and it is, William could want to prove that the virtual world is ultimately meaningless. Or if the theme is about lawlessness, he may think that the world needs more order, and his twisted way of enforcing that would be by creating more crime in it. So connecting to themes grounds motives in the work's ideas, Claude says, which is pretty smart. And then it suggested maybe he wants more power, he might resent being just a cog in a machine. And so it gave like a whole bunch of different suggestions. And if you ask, it will just keep giving you more suggestions. And I would totally pay money for this kind of feedback. This is the kind of feedback you normally only get from a very good structural editor or from a critique group with a really deep understanding of your writing, or maybe a very, very good beta reader or writing partner. I was very impressed. Now, if you keep asking it for more ideas, eventually it will start to repeat itself. So there's a limit to how much it can come up with. So I asked it for some suggestions for personal grudges that the villain could have against people, and it came up with them. I picked one at random, that he had a fight with the company owner about the proper way to fold a napkin. And I asked it, how would I add it to the book? And it suggested I could have a flashback scene, or I could have other characters speculating about it, or I can have the company owner himself mention the incident. And so I like the idea of the flashback, but where would I put this flashback? So I asked Claude, where is the best place to put the flashback scene so that it has the maximum impact in the story without giving away the plot? Because you don't want to have it too early, because then you know who the criminal is, who the villain is. So what Claude said is, based on what we know so far about the plot, I would suggest placing the flashback scene near the end of chapter 6 or the beginning of chapter 7. Here's why. By the end of chapter 6, the bad guy has been accused of being the bad guy, but has denied the accusations. Placing the flashback scene here would come right after the accusations, but before the final confrontation. That is really smart, and it would take me maybe half an hour to come up with this. Like if I were to go through the book and read it through to figure out where to place the flashback scene. And Claude did it in seconds. I mean, it was instant. I was very much impressed. And it suggested things that I could put in the flashback, like some moments of comedy to break up the suspenseful plot that's at that moment. I could reveal details about the company owner's character. I could provide more nuance and complexity to the plot and characterization by revealing the company owner's role in inspiring the grudge. I could also include details about the company culture, politics, or inner workings that would lend more realism and world building. I can also have characters who are never seen again, because Claude says fleeting appearances by minor characters can make a setting feel fuller. And that's pretty good. I mean, these are all like really, really good things. So you might think at this point, Claude knows everything about what's going to go into this book. Just have him write, or have it write the scene for you, right? So I did it. I had Claude write the scene, and it sucked. It sucked so bad. It was basically like a summary of a scene, not an actual scene. The dialogue was all really weird and off, and it wasn't even written like a story. It was written like a screenplay. So it missed everything about it. I guess I would kind of say it's like asking a sports coach to go out and win the game for you. You still have to play the game no matter how good the coach is. I mean, often the best coaches are not the best players. So I'm used to this with editors. I mean, somebody who's a really, really good editor is not necessarily a very good writer. Those are very two different skill sets. And somebody who can help people improve might not necessarily be someone who's great at it themselves. And in fact, somebody who's great at it themselves might not have much sympathy for someone who's like learning how to do it, especially if they're naturally good at it. They never had to learn it. They don't know the process you have to go through to learn it. But that's an aside. That's nothing to do with AIs, because AIs have no personal history or feelings or whatever. But and so in theory, in the future, it will be able to write the stuff as well. But right now, it cannot, unless you're a lot better at prompt engineering than I had time to get in this short session with it. You have to get really, really specific with your prompts to get good writing out of these large language models. Because by default, they'll give you something that sounds like a Wikipedia summary, because that's most of what it's been trained on. So that kind of makes sense. Next, I had to do some style editing. And very similar, I said, you're now a style, let's see, what prompt did I give it? I said, you're an expert style editor with decades of experience. You have worked with hundreds of best-selling science fiction and fantasy authors and understand what makes a book readable. I am a sci-fi author at the beginning of my writing career and need help with my writing style. What are the top problems with this book as far as the stylistic aspects of the writing are concerned? I'm thinking about things like pacing, tone, and amount of description. So very similar prompts to the kind of prompts that I've given it before. And it gave me a whole bunch of recommendations for things that need improving. Let me share the screen here. So, nope, that screen went away. So for example, it told me that I needed descriptions in specific chapters and scenes, and gave me a long list of them, such as in chapter 1, when I introduce the world that it's setting, there's very little sensory detail provided about what the actual world feels like for characters. And then I didn't have enough atmospheric details about the key location that would really improve the book if I had that in there. So yeah, so it gave me like a long list of things, and if it didn't give enough, you can keep asking for more. And I have a list of style questions you might want to ask Claude in the article. For example, does each scene contain sufficient description? Is each new character sufficiently described? Is the characterization believable and consistent? Are there any sections where I'm telling rather than showing? Is the narrative voice consistent, or does it change unexpectedly between scenes? And so on and so forth. So lots of really good stuff there. And again, Claude was really, really good about this. And then we get to the last stage of the process, copy editing. And Claude was a total flop. Claude cannot do a line edit. So the prompt I gave it was, you're an expert copy editor with decades of experience. You've worked with hundreds of best-selling sci-fi and fantasy authors, blah, blah, blah. I need help with style, grammar, punctuation. If you understand, please ready, the usual thing, except I cut and pasted another book this time around because I wanted to see how it would do for a longer piece. So I said, if you understand, please say I'm ready, please paste your text. And I pasted a 60,000 word novel in there. And it was fine with some things. So it handled the structural stuff and the style stuff. But again, it fell down on the copy editing. So it was able to pick up inconsistent points of view. So occasionally my story shifts between third-person limited and omniscient point of view. Third-person limited is when you're within one person's head and you only see what they see. And omniscient is when you're floating up above, like a camera, and you can see everything in the scene. And you can see, or like around the corners, to things that the characters can't see. So that's omniscient. And in my story, it was mostly third-person limited, but then occasionally I slip into omniscient. That's a problem. It also pointed out my overuse of passive voice and that occasionally I would have imprecise words. And this was good. So it wasn't like 100% flop. It was like 50% flop. Because I was able to ask it, give me a list of all the scenes with the paragraphs where the point of view is inconsistent. And it did it. Oh, it also gave me a review of which point of view I should have, which I was very much impressed by. So I said, having read the book, which point of view do you recommend? Limited third person or omniscient? And it said, based on what I read, I would recommend sticking consistently to limited third person point of view. It's more common and readable, and sticking to one consistent point of view improves clarity. The story is primarily driven by the experiences of a few key characters. Limited third person allows us to get inside the heads of those central characters while maintaining an objective narrative tone. Omniscient is harder to pull off, and it's difficult to form an emotional connection with a story. So this was like really good. It was relevant to my book. So it didn't just explain to me the difference between omniscient and third person, but which was better for my particular book, which I really, really appreciated. And so then it went through and it found examples of omniscient voice that I should change to limited third person. It found examples of passive voice, places where it needed more description or unclear, where were places where it needed more specific words, etc. But this is where the flop part comes in. It failed totally on grammar. It had a really, really, really hard time finding grammar mistakes. So at first I thought, well, maybe it's because my book is grammar checked. I had a grammar checker run on it. So I started giving it sentences to check. For example, I said, take this sentence. We cleaned all the kitchen while our parents were out to dinner. And at first it said, well, the problem with this sentence is the word cleaned. It's singular. But the subject, we, is plural. So the verb should be cleaned. So instead of cleaned, it should be cleaned. The same word. So I asked several times. So it suggested replacing all the kitchen with all kitchen. And then finally, like on the 6th try, it suggested replacing all the kitchen with all the kitchens, which is still not the same as the whole kitchen. But at least it's grammatically correct. But it took 6 tries to get there. Then I asked it a couple of other sentences to look for the grammar errors in them, and it failed to catch very simple grammar mistakes. At which point I ran out of my 100 questions for the month and I had to stop. So I went over to ChatGPT and I asked it for the same sentences to fix those grammar mistakes. ChatGPT fixed it right away, no problems, first try, perfect responses. And in the kitchen problem, it said you have to say the whole kitchen or just the kitchen, because you can't say all the kitchen. It was perfect. It was absolutely accurate. So if you want a very detailed grammar check or proofread, I suggest pasting it into ChatGPT instead, a short section at a time, because ChatGPT can only do short sections. And then have it fix those grammar mistakes, and then you can put them into the book and then go on to the next section. Don't have it rewrite for you. Both Claude and ChatGPT will sometimes want to rewrite entire sections for you. When it does, it will turn them into a Wikipedia summary. So instead, say, please give me the sentence or paragraph with a mistake in it, and then explain what the mistake is and how to fix it. Don't fix it yourself. So that's the way to go with grammar mistakes. So overall, Claude is very good at outlining a whole book. It's very good at identifying themes, motifs, character arcs that are across the whole book. This is the only AI that can do that right now, as far as I know. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. Oh my gosh, if there's anything else out there, I really want to know about it. All right, so Claude is really good at anything that has to do with a whole book. It's really good at structural edits and finding plot holes. It's really good at character motivations and pacing and stuff like that. I was very, very impressed. And it's really bad at grammar checking. But you know, you have grammar checkers for that anyway. So will I pay for this? Like I said, it's $200 a year or about $17 a month, which is cheaper than ChatGPT. But no, I'm not going to pay for it because, first of all, the interface needs to be improved. As you can see from all my scrolling before, let me show you. Let me show you the scrolling again so you can see how horrible it is. So this is me scrolling through this, and this is only, you know, my 100 messages. But look, when you paste in a thing that's, you know, 20,000 words or 60,000 words, it's really hard to like look through it to see what's happening, because it's just really hard to navigate. You really want to have a sidebar with the individual chats on it, so that you can keep track of different stories that you're editing, that it's not just all in one window. So all the stories that I edited today were all in one window. So the 20,000 or the 17,000 word stories in here, the 60,000 word stories in here, a couple of other stories I pasted in when I was experimenting are in there. And trying to go through them all is really hard. You want to have them as separate things, separate tabs or something. The way ChatGPT does it is better. It's still not great. I would like it to automatically sort things into folders or attach labels to them, because after a while it gets really crowded. You start getting a lot of stuff in there. So I personally would not pay for Claude. It was fun to play with it, but I did run out of my 100 messages very quickly. But if you are a writer, you should check it out. First of all, 100 messages a month may be enough for you. You might have like, you know, it might take you a month just to get through the edits and recommends, right? In your first 100 messages before you go on to the next set of 100. So this might be a good pace for you. And over time, this will improve. You know, you might get more messages. You might get better grammar checking and stuff like that too. So at the very least, check out the free trial to see what's possible, because the stuff that ChatGPT, the stuff that Claude does now, we're probably going to see in ChatGPT and everywhere else pretty soon, because AI is moving so fast. It is insane how fast it's developing. So the technology that we see, the stuff that I just showed you with Claude, which is insanely good. I'm just gobsmacked that this is possible. I would not have thought that this was going to be possible in any near future if you'd asked me a year ago. So it's really astounding. It's super useful. Yes, it can't write for you, but it can do a really good job at this high level kind of analysis and editing. Very impressive. So if you're a writer, definitely check it out. Now, if you're an editor, is your career over? No. The baseline of your performance has now gone up. So you better be as good as Claude in your editing. And you probably want to include Claude in your toolbox, as well as a grammar checker, as well as spell checker, you know, and everything else you use, because it's going to help you be better and more productive. You can use it as a second pair of eyes to make sure you didn't miss anything. You can use it as a first round of analysis just to get you started. And then you would add on to that. So that's the part where the human value comes in. And if you can't do that, if you can't give what Claude or ChatGPT gives, plus a whole bunch extra, then why would somebody use you instead of just using Claude or ChatGPT? So I do think that there's still a role for human editors. ChatGPT misses stuff, Claude misses stuff. And a lot of people still need hand-holding to actually get stuff done. So this is where humans come in. And also people feel obligated to other humans, whereas I don't really feel any obligation to Claude to do what it tells me to do. But if a human told me to do something and I didn't, I'd feel guilty, that I let them down. So it'd be like an extra bit of motivation for me to get stuff done. So if you're like that, then having a human editor is very, very much worth it. But if you ignore this, if you pretend that AI doesn't exist, or it's going to go away, that it doesn't matter, that it's not real, that doesn't have soul, whatever, you're missing one of the most powerful tools out there for writers and editors right now. And why? Also, we're probably going to see this functionality start being built into Microsoft Word and Google Docs. Google has already invested money in Anthropic, the company that makes Claude. So I would not be surprised if Claude shows up in Google Docs, just as Microsoft is already planning to add ChatGPT to Microsoft Word. So we're not going to be able to avoid this stuff. All right. So that's what's happening out there right now, guys. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. And yeah, check out the full article with all the prompts and everything else in the description box below. If you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. Oh, and we also do a free Friday. Every Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, we publish an article and a newsletter about the top 10 free science fiction and fantasy books on Amazon. So check that out. Subscribe to a newsletter to get that. It's totally free. And on the website, we have hundreds of free short stories that we publish thanks to our Patreon supporters. You guys rock. We love you. The link to our Patreon is in the description box below. If you have any questions about this, email me. My email address is below. I'm totally fine with that. Or you're gonna also put comments in the comments below. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.